There is a line in my favorite movie. It stood the test of time, and it remains on my Mount Rushmore. It's something like 25 years old, and yet I still reserve a place for The Big Lebowski. And there remains a line in that movie that I think explains a lot. It explains some of your personal relationships. It explains how we can look at the national news cycle. We can explain human behavior. And it's a moment when the dude, Jeff Lebowski, is sitting in his car along with Walter Sobchak, the dude played by Jeff Bridges, Walter Sobchak, played by John Goodman. And John Goodman is repeatedly saying to the dude, am I wrong? Am I wrong? Walter, am I wrong? And the dude says, well, here, listen for yourself.
You're not wrong, Walter. You're just an ass.
It's absolutely one of my favorite lines in philosophy. Forget movies. It's one of my favorite lines in philosophy. You're not wrong, Walter. You're just an a-hole. By the way, on the topic of the Big Lebowski retaining a position, standing the test of time on my Mount Rushmore, did you guys back in New York, did you see Nancy Pelosi on CBS Sunday Morning? She has offered up an addition to the real Mount Rushmore. Of course, Mount Rushmore. 4 famous presidents, but she's ready for a 5th. I think she's ready for a 5th. Can't tell if she's erasing one of the presidents, but she's ready to add a 5th to Mount Rushmore. I need you to listen to Nancy Pelosi from CBS Sunday Morning.
Such a consequential president of the United States, a Mount Rushmore kind of president of the United States. Want to know what comes next?
That he belongs up there on Mount Rushmore. Lincoln and Joe Biden.
But you got Teddy Roosevelt up there, and he's wonderful. I don't say take him down, but you can add Biden.
There you go. By the way, boys, in New York, did Teddy Roosevelt just get canceled?
I think so.
Did she just? I mean, Nancy Pelosi always seems to be 2 Chardonnays into a conversation. But that right there, is hard to keep up with. I'm not positive, but I think she canceled Teddy Roosevelt off of Mount Rushmore. I don't think she was taking it to 5. I think she was replacing Roosevelt with Biden.
Yeah, she kind of just disqualified him, and she didn't really give a reason. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that would say, oh, Teddy's not cool now.
It's a wild, fascinating move.
Well, Leslie Stahl goes, Lincoln, Biden, and her first thought, I'm not kicking off Lincoln, but Teddy's up there. And then she catches herself and goes, well, and I'm not trying to take off Teddy either, but we add Biden. So get to work. Get to work. The unemployment rate is up to 4%. So like in a FDR-style TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, a Work Projects Administration, we need to send some federal workers out there to the mountain to carve in Joe Biden.
Oh, man. I saw a good picture on Twitter that would have had the hypothetical, and it had Biden on the Mount Rushmore with that lost gazing eyes looked. Actually, I thought it looked pretty good, but I don't know.
Mouth agape on Mount Rushmore, confused Joe Biden. Also of note, I think in that clip is, did you notice Nancy Pelosi says he's one of the most consequential presidents of our time? This I find fascinating. Okay. I agree. Joe Biden is one of the most consequential presidents of our time. He is consequential in that he's ushered in perhaps one of the worst economies. He has set the world on the brink of potential multiple World War fronts. He's hid, along with his administration, the mental senility of a president. He has no doubt he's consequential, but what I found more interesting about Nancy Pelosi choosing that adjective is that it's the latest in the viral sheep bleat that comes from the left. And I don't want to be overly partisan. Does this happen on the right? I ask you listening. I ask you on social media. I ask you on YouTube. I ask you this on radio. What is the verbal viral tick of the right? Because it happens in I would say, I'm going to give it 60-day, 45-day cycles for the left. Consequential became, some type of virus, diarrhea or vomit. It became the repetitive word that infected the left. They all were saying Joe Biden is consequential. He's not great until now, until he's made his way to Mount Rushmore. He's not the best. He's consequential. The comparison, I think, is to Washington, who declined to become king. So Joe Biden being forced out of the race makes him consequential. Consequential only lasted until the left decided and got infected with weird. They started calling J.D. Vance and Donald Trump weird. I've told you guys this in the past. I am on a lot of emails, and I guess one could say I'm inside the media, whatever that means, although I don't check my Fox News email account. So maybe I'm missing the talking points memos. They're not getting sent to my Gmail. Literally have never checked my Fox email address. I could be getting emails from Rupert Murdoch. I would not know because I don't know the password to my Fox email address. I'd like to believe Rupert can find me on text or through Gmail. But if there's some kind of talking point going out, and it's hermetically sealed within the left that we're all going to say X, we're all going to repeat it Y times, they're doing a great job of keeping that within the family. I just truly think it's not a talking point. I think it's viral. It's verbal viruses. It's groupthink sheep. They literally start repeating pandemic of the unvaccinated. 2 feet bad, 4 feet good. Weird. Consequential president. And there's Nancy Pelosi saying consequential president again. If there is one on the right, because I don't want to be overly partisan, and I always strive for self-awareness. So let's take a look into the mirror. If there is that kind of vocabulary virus on the right, please point it out to me. Please drop into the comments section on YouTube. Hit me up on X at Will Cain. Instagram, see Will Cain. Will Cain Show on all those platforms. What is the verbal virus of the right? But even one more thing on Nancy Pelosi's just stunning 25 seconds of television on CBS Sunday Morning. She stabbed him in the back. She's Brutus. This is Brutus wiping the blood off of his knife and going, Caesar, what a great Roman. She is the one that forced him out. And she tries to play some slippery language of, well, I never made one call. I never made one call. And he knows that. I love him, Joe Biden. Well, so what if you never made one call? I watch Veep. Did you have your staffers make the call and then hand the phone to you? Did you send a text? Did you send an email? Did you receive calls? Did Leslie Stahl ask any of those follow-up questions? Or did she get away with, I never made one call? I mean, this is the standard by which Teddy Roosevelt just got dynamited off of Mount Rushmore. But Mount Rushmore, the Big Lebowski, you're not wrong, Walter. You're just an a-hole. As I sat on vacation for the past 2 weeks, week and a half, one of the things you realize is that much of the conversation in politics is right. Much of it, though, makes many of us an a-hole. And very little of it feels real. It all feels phony. Let's start with Kamala Harris. One of the conversations that came up over the past week and a half is whether or not Kamala Harris is black or whether or not Kamala Harris is Indian, whether or not she plays race to her advantage. It is true that Kamala Harris has been celebrated as the first great Indian American politician in the United States. It is also true that Kamala Harris went to Howard, a historically black college. It is undoubtedly true that Kamala Harris is mixed race, and she can be celebrated, if you're into identity politics, as an Indian American and as a black American. Donald Trump, speaking at the NABJ conference, the National Association of Black Journalists conference, got into it. I think the ABC reporter who questioned Donald Trump and started with, tell me how you're not racist, is beyond the pale. I have experienced that. I have. Like, remember, I worked at ESPN for 5 years. Before that, I was at CNN. I'll never forget. I got so frustrated, literally. And if we're being real, this is where the relationship went south. I got so frustrated appearing on Don Lemon's show every Sunday night, starting with the premise of, tell me how you and Republicans aren't racist. And this was back in the days of when they were making Mitt Romney out to be a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And now, of course, Mitt Romney is going to, according to the left, sit next to Joe Biden on Mount Rushmore for the 6th spot, break out more dynamite. But back then, they were busy in the project of convincing America that Mitt Romney was the grand wizard. I just got so tired with that being the presumption, the beginning. Tell us how you're not racist. And that's exactly what was done at that NABJ conference by, I think her name is Rachel Scott from ABC. Here, listen to this totally disingenuous, incurious, and malintentioned question you can imagine for a guest that shows up to your conference.
You have told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabid to describe black district attorneys. You've attacked black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking black supporters to vote for you, why should black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country.
Forget whether or not that question is rude. That question is incurious. That question is not a open question designed to arrive at an answer. It is an indictment and a conclusion designed to manipulate the audience. But there sits Donald Trump. Where is Kamala Harris? Where is Kamala Harris? Why isn't she at the NABJ conference? For that matter, the person who's now been the presumptive Democratic nominee for president for 2 weeks hasn't given a single interview. So where is Kamala Harris? But I think it's dumb to indulge in, is Kamala Harris black? Is Kamala Harris Indian? Which is something that Trump brought up at that conference, the NABJ, and has been repeated now for many on the right. But it's not because they're wrong. It's because they come off as an a-hole. What I'm saying here is take the lesson of the Big Lebowski. When you step back from the bubble, when you stop talking to other people who always agree with you, when you stop living on social media, you start to see how real people live. This is where vacation is valuable. You got to see how real people think, and it's just a massive turnoff. But again, it's not wrong. See, the question isn't, is Kamala Harris black or Indian? The question is Kamala Harris a phony? Is she fake? And that, the answer seems to be yes. Here are some better examples. How about switching your accent in front of every audience you appear? Kamala Harris last week spoke in front of a black audience, and she all of a sudden slipped into a black accent. That's not my estimation. That's a fact. And that led to headlines like this from the Associated Press. Analysis. Donald Trump questioning Kamala Harris's race shows he doesn't understand code switching. Code switching. Changing your voice and accent to suit your audience. I thought Fisher King on X said this well. He said, no, Donald Trump doesn't understand code switching. He wears the same style suit and tie, talks the same to everyone, doesn't patronize them, which is a show of respect. Code switching is just a fancy term for being a phony and a liar, changing yourself because you look down on others. Most famous code switcher, Hillary Clinton. How about Joe Biden? They're going to put y'all back in chains. If I'm being real, guys in New York, let me ask you this. If I'm being real, do I ever code switch? Like, I pride myself on being authentic. I truly do, being real. And this is a process of that, okay? I'm using you as my mirror. I just got back from Hawaii. I'm going to tell you more about it in just a moment. I hung out with some of the people that I've grown close to over the past year, you know, who we've worked together on projects to rebuild Lahaina. We've distributed funds. And all of a sudden I asked myself, Will, are you doing a Hawaii accent? Are you doing a little pigeon? And so, I don't know. Do I code switch?
I don't think so. Sometimes I think maybe like everyone, they do a little mirroring, but nothing code switching. You know what I mean?
Sometimes the Texas accent comes out a little stronger.
Yeah.
Well, I have an adaptable accent. I mean, I know this. I live in New York for 15 years, and people are like, where's your Texas accent?
Yeah.
I moved back to Texas for 3 years, and everybody's like, what's up, redneck? So I know that it's fluid.
I actually
don't know
thought
that I'm consciously code switching.
I thought it came out more during your Stephen A. Smith interview, and maybe that was kind of like a relic of going back to the first take days.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think
Was I
that's a
doing a
place
black
where it
accent?
would. No, a Texas accent.
Was I code switching with Stephen A. Smith?
Breaking news.
I do think code switching, at least consciously, is a sign of phoniness. I certainly don't want to be phony. What I want to be is authentic. So I want to make that. I want to look in that long mirror. I want to make that analysis of myself. But Kamala Harris, it's a very legitimate question. Is she being phony? Is she being whoever you need her to be in that moment? I think that's just happening so much. And it's not really just among politicians and public figures. It's happening. I'm increasingly skeptical of everything I'm getting information-wise. Let me tell you another bit of phoniness I'm playing to the audience. I didn't like the Olympic boxer story. And I didn't like it literally from every angle. And watching that from afar. Anyone who's ever listened to the Will Cain Show for quite some time knows how passionately and dedicated I am to the idea that there should not be women in men's sports or men in women's sports, that trans is a social contagion, that I will not use, and I'm not trying to be Walter Sobchak. I'm not trying to be an a-hole, but I will not use someone's preferred pronouns because I don't think I should change objective reality to fit someone else's subjective reality in pursuit of being well-liked. I think I have to live in reality. But this story of Amani Khalifi out of it's Algeria, the boxer who, defeated the Italian boxer, it just wasn't done. I'm telling you, I don't think it was done in goodwill. I don't think it was done to enlighten you. And that's from every side. I watched NBC's coverage of it, okay? I watched NBC's coverage of this story, right? The allegation is it's a man from Algeria who's beating up women in boxing, right? And it's been allowed by the IOC. Well, I watched 3 minutes of coverage from NBC, and I knew nothing at the end of it. Like, they're just running terrified. They're terrified of the story. They gave me this policy, that policy, but at the end, I have no idea whether or not the Algerian boxer is male or female. None. And that's not journalism. I don't know what that is. That's a tail between your leg spew of word salad. But then those on the, I believe this. There's those on the right that try to conflate it with a trans issue. It's just not a trans story. It's not. It's not about someone choosing their gender identity. It's, from the beginning of this debate about trans, there has been a very small slice of this conversation. It is a very small slice statistically of people who legitimately and biologically were like, are they male or are they female? They call it intersex. In the old days, they would say androgynous or hermaphrodite. It's a medical condition. You can be born, with it's not clear. It's not even, I don't think it's legal to do trans in Algeria. It's just not, that's not what the story was. And there's been some cop-out, I believe, on the right in the end to be like, it's not about whether or not it's trans. It's that men shouldn't be fighting women. And on that, I agree. And that's where it's back to this conversation. Like, don't play to the audience. In the beginning, all the trans stuff, it's like it's played to the audience, but didn't enlighten any of us. Here's some enlightenment. Here's what I find. Here's the information I would have wanted to hear. Ross Tucker is a guy that's been involved in these debates. Because this has happened before. There was a South African runner named Caster Semenya. Is she female? Is she too male? It happens. And I found this information fascinating. One, the boxer is not trans. Two, the IBA says that she, I'm going to use the pronoun she, because I don't believe this is a trans issue. I'm trying to achieve objective reality. The IBA says she failed eligibility to compete as a female. We do not know the test specifics. So the IBA ran tests. And this fighter came back with XY chromosomes. We all know XY is, at least primarily, overwhelmingly associated with men, XX, female. But then they do an analysis of whether or not the XY chromosome is accompanied by competitive advantages. And there's like testosterone testing and what they call DSD, androgen advantage. It's not just having high testosterone. So you could be a female XX with high testosterone. You wouldn't be barred. But if you have the XY plus this other stuff, you will be barred because you have XY, which overwhelmingly suggests male, and you have the competitive advantages, which have also been separately tested that go along with XY. So there's been suggestions you just go back to the mouth swab. You test XX, XY. It's a screen. If you come up XY, then you test for higher testosterone. Then you test for androgen, all these other advantages. And if you have those, you can't compete as a female. The IOC didn't run any of this, so this boxer got to compete as a female. Now, here's the Walter Sobchak test, the Big Lebowski test. I don't think this person should have been fighting against females. And I don't think this person is a complete victim either. Like, if you have these advantages and you are XY, even if your parents, even if you have this condition, it doesn't mean that your condition becomes everyone else's problem. We can have empathy, but we don't have to have no backbone. Our empathy doesn't require us to devoid ourselves from our principles. Men shouldn't hit women. And if you have, according to the tests, over-indexed to man, don't get in the ring with women. And IOC, do your job. Don't put this fighter in the ring with women. But it's not a trans issue. It's not the American culture war issue, which is a legit war. But it is true. In the end, it's a man in the ring with a woman. We just don't need to play to our audience and getting high fives on our way to winning the culture war debate, which should be easily winnable anyway when it comes to trans and men participating in women's sports. But back to everything being fake and nothing being real. And finally, what is phony? The biggest point on Kamala Harris isn't her race. It's not even her code switching. It is her policies. That's what's phony, okay? That's what you have to understand about Kamala Harris. She's anti-fracking, now she's pro-fracking, open to fracking. She's Green New Deal, now she understands that'll lose her election, so maybe she needs to be a little more pro-oil and gas. She's hard on crime when it comes to marijuana. She's soft on crime when it comes to serious crimes. She's anti-marijuana. Next thing you know, she's on the Breakfast Club saying, hey, my family's from Jamaica. What, of course, you think I know about marijuana. Seemingly acting like it's cool. She's all in on marijuana. She was the furthest left voting senator in the United States Senate. And now, with no pressure from the press, no need to answer questions, no press conference, no big speech delivering her policy and her principles for 2 running weeks, Kamala Harris will try to sell herself as a moderate as she sits on top of a cratering economy she helped build that from day one was called the Biden-Harris ticket, and a world is devolving into world wars. And for that, we need to ask, phony or real? Regardless, not 4 more years.